When the weight of tariffs becomes more than economics, when a leader feels the sting of unfair trade policies as a personal blow, that's when diplomacy turns tense and alliances shift. Tonight, a moment of global recalibration. In Tianjin, amidst the Grand Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, a powerful gesture of camaraderie unfolds, one that echoes far beyond borders. The dramatic imposition of a 50% tariff on Indian imports by the United States has set off alarm bells across global markets and stirred deep political ripples in New Delhi. For India, this isn't just a matter of numbers on a balance sheet. It is a direct challenge to the very framework of its trade relations with one of its most significant partners. The scale of this move makes it one of the steepest trade measures ever imposed by Washington on any ally, and its impact is being felt across industries from textiles and pharmaceuticals to the tech sector. The message behind the tariff is as sharp as the penalty itself, that the U.S. views the trade relationship as one-sided, and that years of negotiations and gradual progress may now stand in jeopardy. What makes this development even more striking is the timing. India, a nation striving to walk a delicate line between East and West, finds itself hit hardest just as its leadership seeks to bolster ties with global powers. For Washington, the tariff is being framed as a necessary correction to a long-standing imbalance. Officials have cited trade deficits, differences over market access, and disputes over subsidies as reasons for the drastic step. But for Indian policymakers, the move feels more like a punitive strike that overlooks the complexities of an evolving partnership. India has long argued that its markets, while protective in some sectors, are opening up steadily, and that cooperation in technology, defense, and energy should not be overshadowed by short-term trade grievances. The fallout is being felt most acutely by Indian exporters, many of whom now face the prospect of losing competitiveness in a U.S. market where price sensitivity is high. Textile producers, for instance, fear that cheaper alternatives from other Asian economies may quickly erode India's foothold. Pharmaceutical firms, a sector where India has traditionally enjoyed strong demand in the U.S., are bracing for turbulence as well, with concerns that the tariffs could complicate supply chains and disrupt affordability for American consumers. The irony is that many of these products fill gaps in the U.S. market, offering cost-effective alternatives that benefit ordinary families. By raising barriers, critics warn the U.S. risks hurting its own consumers while inflicting pain on Indian businesses. Beyond economics, however, lies the larger question of diplomacy. Trade, in this context, is not an isolated battlefield, but a lever of influence. India, already balancing a tricky relationship with China and deepening ties with Russia, now faces added pressure to reevaluate its strategic partnerships. The perception in New Delhi is that Washington's move disregards India's role as a counterweight in Asia and risks alienating a country that has often been hailed as a crucial partner in Indo-Pacific. By framing the trade relationship as unfair, Washington may be underestimating India's ability to pivot toward other partners, something already on display as India strengthens its ties with Beijing and Moscow at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. For observers in both capitals, the 50% tariff is more than a trade statistic. It is a litmus test of resilience and adaptability. Can the U.S. and India weather this storm, or will the strain push them further apart? For now, the shock is real, the stakes are high, and the world is watching closely as one of the most consequential bilateral relationships in modern geopolitics hangs in the balance. On the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, an image emerged that carried more weight than a dozen formal communiques. India's Prime Minister sat across the table from two of the world's most powerful figures, China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin, and the warmth of their interactions was impossible to ignore. Smiles, handshakes, and words exchanged in a tone of camaraderie sent a message far beyond the walls of the conference hall. At a time when India's ties with Washington are strained by steep tariffs and accusations of one-sided trade, these gestures of closeness signal a shift that could reshape the global balance of alliances. The setting itself added to the symbolism. The SCO, often seen as an Eastern counterweight to Western alliances, provided a stage for India to reinforce its role as a major power that will not be isolated or pressured into submission. For Xi and Putin, welcoming India more warmly than ever was both a strategic play and a statement that they are ready to draw New Delhi closer, particularly at a moment when it feels squeezed by Washington's economic blows. The chemistry on display was not accidental. It was carefully cultivated, a projection of solidarity that spoke to shared frustrations with U.S. policies and a vision of a multipolar world where no single power dominates. Observers noted that the body language between India and its two counterparts contrasted starkly with the sharp rhetoric emanating from across the Atlantic. While U.S. leaders talked of imbalances and unfairness, Tianjin was marked by words of friendship, strategic trust, and cooperation. This warmth did not just serve symbolic purposes, it underscored the growing alignment on practical fronts. Energy, defense, and infrastructure all loom large as areas where India, China, and Russia see potential gains from working more closely together. Russia, under heavy sanctions from the West, has already turned eastward, finding in India a dependable buyer of its oil. China, embroiled in its own trade disputes with the United States, has every incentive to strengthen ties with a neighbor that shares concerns about Western dominance. For India, this balancing act is not without risks, but the moment highlights its determination to assert independence in foreign policy. Warm meetings with Xi and Putin are not meant as a rejection of ties with the United States, but as a reminder that India has options and will not be boxed into any single orbit. At home, this plays well with public opinion that increasingly prizes the idea of strategic autonomy, the belief that India should navigate the world on its own terms rather than as a junior partner to any superpower. Abroad, it sends a warning that punitive measures like tariffs can push India to lean more visibly toward other global players. The optics in Tianjin, therefore, were not merely diplomatic niceties. They were a calculated response to a changing international environment. By projecting warmth towards Xi and Putin, India reminded the world, and Washington most of all, that in the chessboard of global politics, it is not a pawn to be moved at will, but a player capable of recalibrating alliances. That gesture of warmth, captured in handshakes and shared words, now reverberates far beyond the summit halls, raising questions about how the balance of power in Asia and beyond may shift in months ahead. Analysts are calling it less a retreat and more a revelation of India's evolving worldview, what many describe as the bold assertion of strategic autonomy. For years, India has carefully calibrated its place between competing power centers, nurturing strong relations with Washington while keeping long-standing ties with Moscow alive and maintaining a wary but essential engagement with Beijing, now under the glare of steep tariffs and a fresh strain on U.S.-India relations. That balancing act is no longer in the background. It is front and center, with New Delhi signaling that it will not be coerced into choosing sides, but instead will expand its network of partnerships to safeguard its national interests. Strategic autonomy is not a new doctrine for India. From the era of non-alignment during the Cold War to the multi-vector diplomacy of today, Indian leaders have consistently resisted the idea of aligning exclusively with any single bloc. What feels different in this moment is the urgency with which India is applying it. The sudden shock of a 50% tariff on Indian imports has forced New Delhi to rethink how dependent it should remain on U.S. goodwill. While Washington has become an indispensable defense and technology partner in recent years, the tariffs have injected a sense of vulnerability, reminding India that reliance on any one partner carries risks when political winds shift. This is why, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, India's outreach to Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin carried layers of meaning. It was not a pivot away from Washington, but a demonstration of alternatives, an insurance policy against being cornered. Russia remains a crucial supplier of energy and defense systems, while China, despite deep border disputes with India, offers trade opportunities and regional influence that cannot be ignored. By diversifying its diplomatic bets, India is sending a clear message. It will continue to engage the United States, but it will not be held hostage to its policies. The pursuit of strategic autonomy also reflects domestic imperatives. Within India, there is strong public sentiment that the country should chart its own course in global affairs. Voters often respond positively when leaders stand firm against external pressure, and the notion of India as an independent power resonates deeply with a national narrative of sovereignty and pride. By showcasing friendly interactions with both Moscow and Beijing, while simultaneously engaging in robust defense cooperation with Washington, India is reinforcing that identity on the world stage. Critics argue that such a balancing act risks diluting India's commitments, leaving it stretched between competing demands. Yet, supporters point out that in an era where alliances are increasingly fluid, flexibility is not a weakness but a strength. In fact, India's ability to navigate between East and West without being absorbed by either camp may prove to be its greatest geopolitical asset. As trade disputes deepen and rivalries sharpen, India's strategic autonomy is not only a diplomatic shield but also a bargaining chip, reminding every partner that its friendship cannot be taken for granted, and its choices will be guided by its own vision of the future. In Washington, the tariff decision has sparked a debate that goes far beyond economics. Lawmakers, analysts, and foreign policy veterans are voicing growing concern that the United States may be pushing one of its most important partners into the arms of its rivals. For years, bipartisan consensus in Washington has held that India represents not only a vital trade partner, but also a cornerstone of America's Indo-Pacific strategy, a counterbalance to China's expanding influence. Yet with the imposition of sweeping 50% tariffs, that carefully cultivated relationship now faces one of its most serious tests. On Capitol Hill, critics are already warning that this approach could backfire. Some argue that by framing India as an unfair trading partner and hitting it with tariffs harsher than those faced by other U.S. allies, Washington risks alienating a country it cannot afford to lose. Voices across the political spectrum are cautioning that the move undermines years of painstaking diplomatic work, during which successive administrations, both Republican and Democrat, invested in bringing India closer. There is real fear that the tariff shock could undo much of that progress, driving New Delhi toward Moscow and Beijing just as global rivalries are intensifying. Foreign policy analysts share these concerns. Many point out that India has always been sensitive to perceived slights or unequal treatment, and that policies seen as punitive can trigger recalibrations in its external alignments. Already, India's warm display of camaraderie with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit is being read as a signal of where New Delhi may lean if pressure from Washington continues. Analysts note that this was not merely diplomatic theater. It was a reminder that India has choices, and that it will not remain tethered to any one partner if that partnership comes at too high a cost. For Washington, the danger lies not only in losing ground to rivals, but also in weakening the broader Indo-Pacific framework that has been central to U.S. strategy. India's role in this architecture is irreplaceable. It provides geographic depth, a vast market, and military potential that no other regional partner can match. If punitive trade measures drive a wedge between the two nations, it could erode the credibility of U.S. efforts to rally allies and partners against Chinese influence in the region. As some lawmakers have bluntly put it, alienating India at this moment is nothing short of a strategic goal. Even within the U.S. business community, there is unease. American companies that rely on Indian imports from pharmaceuticals to textiles warn that tariffs will not only raise costs for consumers at home, but also sour the investment climate abroad. They argue that cooperation rather than confrontation is the better path to addressing trade imbalances. By escalating tensions, the U.S. risks weakening not only diplomatic ties, but also the economic relationship that has been steadily expanding over the past 2 decades. The concerns being raised in Washington capture a sense of unease about the road ahead. If the goal is to strengthen America's global position, critics warn, then isolating India could prove counterproductive. Instead of drawing New Delhi closer, these tariffs may drive it into the very alignments U.S. policymakers most fear. And in the fluid, high-stakes arena of global politics, that is a risk the United States can ill afford.